My name is Luca Vicini. I was born in the States. Both my parents are Italian, hence my name. I lived in America for 13 years before moving to Cambridge, UK, where I took my GCSEs and A-levels, and then ended up applying to book for undergrad. I did economics and management. And then after Bocconi, I was looking to broaden my horizons and do a master's abroad. And so I applied to a few schools before getting into LSE, and I'm going to be taking accounting and finance there next year.
So firstly, congratulations to your very recent admission to your actually number one top choice program at LSE. Tell us a little bit more on how you actually met us at 700.
So I went to, when I was studying at Bocconi, the fall of my last year, I went to the US Fair in Milan, and I think it was November, October. Then I met one of the representatives from 700 Plus Club, because I was, looking at preparing the GMAT, and they were super easy to talk to, super outgoing. I ended up exchanging my email with the representative, and we exchanged emails, and that's how I kind of came into contact with the team.
That's great. So yeah, this is one of those nice things with those trade shows in general, that you actually not only get to meet the business schools, but also people like us who can actually support you and guide you exactly. Then you started working on your application. So actually your whole process, you said, was like actually 2 months. Maybe you can share us a little bit in how it was structured.
So they say my method was a bit unorthodox. I had to take my exams at university, my last exams for Bocconi in December and the beginning of January. So I ended up preparing the GMAT from just after I finished my exams, so around the 10th of January, and I took it on the 26th. And then I spent the next 6 weeks kind of drafting and preparing essays, as well as prepping for interviews for the universities that I intended to apply to. So I think it just took a lot more time with my essays than I did with my GMAT.
First, congratulations that for you the GMAT was a very short-lived experience, which is normally not the norm, right? But also on the hand that you actually considered from the very beginning, like you applied at 4 different business schools, that you actually need to take a lot of time for the last bit, where a lot of European students actually assume that it's something that can be very fastly done within a few days. But I think that's also a bit like your exposure that you had in the American system, that this is something you need to dedicate.
Yeah, living in the UK, my sixth form had really stressed the fact that the personal statement for British universities was incredibly important. And, I had a solid academic profile. I had a few months of work experience. I ended up getting a 680 on the GMAT. And, I thought that what could really boost my application was a stellar personal statement. I ended up applying to 2 business schools in the UK, LBS and LSE, one in Paris and one in the US. I thought that for all of these, take my time to personalize each statement, speaking with alumni and current students, and also advice from mentors at 700 Plus Club. All this kind of took time and ended up getting me my offer, so I guess it was time spent.
You actually have already applied for a bachelor's program and you got into Bocconi. Now you continue your academic journey for the master's program at LSE. And I would like to understand a bit, how is it different to apply for both of it? And then also as a second question, given that you as a specific person, you actually had a lot of international exposure, you had a lot of working experience also already with different internships, etc. Given that your profile changed so much, how did it also impact your application?
Bachelor's and master's applications are very, very different. With your bachelor's, you're competing against other high school students who are on the same playing field as you. Not really many people have internship experience before they go to university. And so your personal statement, you're much more limited in what you can write. What puts you apart maybe is how much you've read about the topic you're applying to. I read a few books before writing my personal statement. How much you can demonstrate your interests. Are you part of the economics club at school? Do you do all these kind of super curricular things? And as well as your extracurriculars, it was my sports, my basketball, my rugby, which kind of, maybe helped set me apart in my personal statement. When you're applying to masters, it's different. You're competing against university students who have work experience, maybe even in nicer places than you. You're competing against professionals who worked various years in the industry where you're looking to work in. So your personal statement, you have much less room for error. You need to be professional, you need to put yourself in the best light possible, and you need to demonstrate how that bachelor degree and the experience you've had within it set you apart from the others who have had more and more similar experience. So you need to evolve and be able to demonstrate that in your personal statement.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I can see that you were really like getting very deep into the topic of your application. How did Weird 700 Plus help you to actually get this wisdom and get your great application?
Yeah, I think before meeting Anshul, I was not quite wayward, but definitely not on the super right path. I was kind of taking a kind of meandering path and writing my essays. But Anshul, thankfully, put me in contact with a few 700 Plus Club alumni to help me write my personal statement, especially for LSE, which was my first choice. And so he 2 alumni from there. And I was also able to get in contact with current student, which was on his advice. He said that maybe it's more helpful to have a balance between perspectives. Someone who's there at the moment and can tell you what it's like now, and someone who had done it and can tell you what benefits it gives you. So this balance really ended up shining through in my personal statement. And the 700 Plus Club mentors also proofread it and helped me make the necessary adjustments and helped me maybe modify the tone of it, or perhaps didn't sound so professional, and I ended up sending it off, and 8 weeks later I got my offer. Yeah, pretty cool.
This is also something, given that you applied it for business schools and all like very distinct from each other, maybe you can share us a little bit your learning on what you learned on how to adapt your personal story that is kind of your story, but it might have different angles to adapt fitting for different schools.
Yeah, so I think that, again, understanding how you adapt your profile comes from speaking to alumni or people who study there, maybe reading more about the school. So for example, one of the guys who Angela put me into contact with really stressed that LSE looked at itself not as a business school, but as a very academically oriented, theory heavy school where you go to learn, not necessarily to do as many cases, or in the sense that it's not a business school. They look at it more as an academic institution. And so when I was writing my personal statement, I put this in. It was like, I experienced a theory heavy approach at Bocconi, and so I wanted to continue this kind of journey at this. But speaking to alumni is the way in which you understand which parts of your application you need to emphasize more depending on the school. So luckily enough, allowed me to do this.
How was it working with Anshul?
I can't say enough about Anshul. He was really, really nice to me. He was always available via WhatsApp to help on a call. As I said, he put me in contact with some of his former students. He read my personal statement before sending it off. He was always ready with words of encouragement, advice. So it was super helpful to have someone who knew about the process, who'd gone through it multiple times with multiple students and kind of knew what to expect, to have them in your corner telling you to keep going. It was great.
One building block of your application was the GMAT.
Yeah.
So given that you actually did the SAT also before for your bachelor application and now the GMAT, do you think it gave you like a competitive advantage to have experienced another standardized test similar like this before?
The SAT definitely, it doesn't hurt having that under your belt when you're taking the GMAT. Being used to the question types are very similar, just a bit more advanced. And so, yeah, I think it was helpful. It was a while ago, so there were a few things I needed to freshen up on when I took the GMAT, but it was definitely helpful to have that kind of background standardized test taking. I think I was also very used to the standardized test environment, having done GCSEs and A-levels in the UK. So that idea of sitting in the test room for hours and it's just you with the exam in front of you, I was used to that, and I think that also very helpful.
And you actually did the GMAT also in the test center?
Yes, it was good. When you're taking your mock exams, you want to try to simulate the exams as closely as possible. And I knew I wanted to take it in the test center because I need that kind of environment around me. So when I was taking these mock exams, I tried as closely to simulate it as possible. I would go into my room and I'd wake up early in the morning to try and do it, just so I could be used to having a GMAT in front of me at 8:30 in the morning. And so on test day, it was tough to travel all the way over. I wasn't used to the traveling, the being in the metro, etc. But I got there. The man was super helpful. The entry was pretty easy into the building. And then you sit there and you take the exam and you take your breaks, your 8-minute breaks. And I was pretty stressed because outside there was the clock, right? So you're looking at the clock. And I think you have 8 minutes to get back in, or if the time starts. And so you end up taking a bit less than 8 minutes, but it was good. I enjoyed it, but it was better than taking it at home.
Wonderful. So given that you have gone through successful GMAT, successful application, what are your top tips for someone who's just starting off?
I guess you can break the application down into 2 parts, right? You have your GMAT part and your essay part. I think for the GMAT, the most important part is to know where you're at in the process of preparing your GMAT. So I started by taking a test to see where my strengths and weaknesses were. And after that, I understood that maths really wasn't my forte. So I doubled down on that. Thankfully, my English was pretty good. But I think being honest with yourself and knowing where your weaknesses are and focusing on those, especially given that I'd had such little time to prepare it, was really helpful. And I think that that's the best way to do it, honestly. It's just to understand where you're at and focus on that. And then just start the boxes up until your exam date. For the essays, I think 700 Plus Club really helped me with that. But the idea is that you need to understand what the school is looking for. And it's not always so obvious from the template they give you. So get into contact with students, with former students, with whoever you can who has a connection with the school you're applying to, and understand what traits they kind of emphasize, and then try and make these traits shine through as much as possible in your personal statements. Because, you know, again, my UK upbringing taught me that the personal statements were an essential part of any application, especially when you're applying to these top schools where all applicants have a really strong background. You need a precise statement to kind of set yourself apart.
Thank you so much for those 2 very great tips. I'm sure a lot of people will find
It'll
them
work out.
helpful. Thank you so much, Luca, for sharing your story, sharing your tips.
Yeah, it was my pleasure.
And now people can also soon contact you as a LSE alumni.
I got super lucky with the 2 guys that Anshel sent me, and also a few that I reached out to on end. So happy to help eventually.
Thank you so much.